Hi, I'm Parker.
And I'm Tim.
And this is the Rage Podcast, where today we're going to talk about what our society is doing to certain... certain
individuals.
Individuals and, and ideologies.
Yes. Yeah. And that wonderful thing they're doing is a wonderful experience called cancel culture, which means anything that's outside of the range of what's acceptable gets canceled.
Now I know many of you are probably sick and tired of hearing the term cancel culture, because the second you turn on the news, you're going to hear something like Elmo's canceled next, I assume.
Yeah, we've canceled Dr. Seuss and some of the Sesame Street characters and things. It's goofy.
It's very bizarre how someone can just say something and twist it in any way. So you can take, a character and what was supposed to be funny and what was, and it was funny. Like, you can't, but they'll twist it and make it be like, that person was a terrible individual.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us grew up watching Pepe Le Pew and his exploits, we'll say, and all that's been canceled now. And it just amazes me how some of the things that are outside of what's acceptable are out. Dr. Seuss, one of the most innocuous authors
I've read him
ever.
Forever in my life.
So you got him. And then you've got, like, what happened at the Grammys, I think just last night or the night before, when there was, like, full-on pornography going on the stage. And I don't understand how one of them is harmful. The children's author that has delighted generations of children. And then you've got other things that 5 years ago would have gotten the FCA involved in censoring. But that's good. I don't understand how in the world those two things exist together.
It is... And with that being said, I would like to just target one topic today. I mean, we can definitely talk about a lot of things, but I would like to focus kind of around one.
Okay.
And that is, if we are living in this society where these kind of things are being canceled, the next big thing that I'm not going to say it's the next, but one of the big things that is most likely probably going to eventually be talked about is the Bible needs to go away.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about what the Rage Podcast is, this is a podcast that is based upon a church, and the church is based upon the foundations that are laid out in the Bible and the Christian lifestyle. I mean, it is all in that book. It's very important, and it's formed many cultures, societies, nations. It is a more powerful book than I think most people can comprehend. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, a lot of what's great about the world, really, but the United States for sure, came from principles we learned from the Bible, about principles about fairness and things. Now, are there some troubling things in the Bible? Of course there are. I mean, nobody's denying that. But I think to throw out the Bible because it's outside of the range of what's acceptable is literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's this all or none mentality where the whole thing's got to go. I don't agree with that because an immense amount of good has come from it.
But again, so we talked about some of these characters who have done certain things or have said certain things, and it can be taken the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at some of the Old Testament situations, Tim. We have polygamy. We have
stoning people to death on a regular basis.
I mean, we have a lot of gruesome things, and a lot of that stuff in certain people's hands can be twisted to make it seem like this book is set out for destruction.
Right. And one of the things that we need to be real careful about in this conversation is, if somebody hears you say something and then that person of their own volition went on to do something about it that is bad, can you catch blame for that? Or should you catch blame for that? Would I be legally liable, if Parker and I were to say something here in this podcast and somebody went and did something heinously awful, are we responsible for that? How people are interpreting what's being said. Now, if we're here doing legitimate hate speech, not this so-called hate speech, but if we're trying to tell you to go bash people because of how they look or what they do, or really bash people physically for whatever reason, that's one thing. But just for us to talk and say, we may not agree with everything that goes on out there, and somebody says, well, that's it, somebody's got to get it. We're not telling you, we don't want you to do that. We're not advocating that. I don't ever want that to happen. So can you be responsible for something somebody did based on what they claim they got from you? That's something that scares me a lot, because not only do we have all these online broadcasts, I got decades worth of sermons floating around out there. And who knows? I've gone back and listened to some of my old stuff, and goodness gracious, I've come a long ways. And I don't know that I want to be judged based on any of that stuff I was saying 15, 20 years ago, you know? Because we all grow over time.
But I feel like as Christians and as the church in the world, you know, our foundation is that book, and it's not hard. We need to be I feel like we need to really, really consider what could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, if that gets taken away, so does the foundation. So does the church.
Sure.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard because they say they can take the Bible and twist it to be this whole evil book.
Mm-hmm.
Then that means that the church is a whole evil organization. That means that Christians shouldn't be here. You know. Mm-hmm. Imagine Tim giving a sermon without using any scripture whatsoever.
Yeah, it would just be my best idea, and I guarantee you it wouldn't be as good as what I get out of the Bible.
It is.
So, and one of the reasons that cancel culture has become a thing, and where Parker and I are concerned that someday they're going to come out of after the Bible, is because of this thing called the Overton Window. And I know that's kind of a concept that's thrown around a lot, but that's probably one of the things we need to define, because that's what a lot of these cancellations are based upon, is, you know, what is acceptable in to talk about in polite society, and to do that, we talk about the Overton Window. So in order to learn a little bit more about what the Overton Window is, we're going to go next level with Parker. You want to start it? Step out.
All right.
All right, Parker. Go get him.
The Overton Window, as Tim mentioned, is the range of what is acceptable in polite conversation.
Well, thanks for that, Parker. You know, we want to watch out for that, because the Overton Window can slam shut on your fingers pretty quick, and that's not something we want to see happen to anybody, particularly those who are trying to put the word out there. So, in dealing with the Bible and how we look at that, one of the things that scares me the most is there's so much good content in there that to get bogged down on some of the things that we find more troublesome or more bloody and gory, as Parker was saying, you know, to only focus on those things. And again, those stories are in there for a reason, but to just focus on those and say we got to throw the whole thing out because of that, I just feel like we're losing so much.
I feel like, so I remember, you know, growing up and everything, we learned about the story of why on earth can I not think of his name now? Bottom last of Genesis going into Exodus, Joseph. There we go. Mm-hmm. Holy cow!
Yeah.
But yeah. So Joseph, when you read the story of Joseph, you will come upon a random chapter chapter in Genesis that doesn't fit really in the story of Joseph, but it is all about the It is like the it's a rape story. It's
Tamar. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when you're like in you know, children's, you know, ministry and stuff, and you don't read that. You just skip right over that story.
Skip right over top of that.
But and again, you see, but if we're not, so I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction.
Okay.
If we're not teaching our kids, you know, eventually that those stories are in the Bible, then it's not hard for, say, the government or the cancel culture or whatever to say, look at this. We like expose the Bible to these Christians that don't know it's there, and then boom, they just completely knocked it out. Like it wouldn't be hard if you came up to a Christian and said, well, you know that the Bible has a whole chapter on this story. And I was like, now that whole chapter is very, very difficult and hard to decipher of why it's in Scripture. However, it's there. And if we don't understand the purpose for it, and if we don't understand why it's there, I'll tell you, God has those scenarios in there for only one reason, and that is to say, condemn them.
Yeah, they are condemned. The chapter Parker's talking about is condemned heavily.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
I mean, the reason we have those examples and those things in the Bible are so God makes sure we know they are condemned.
Right, and actually, the person who really gets condemned in that story is not so much Ammon who committed this terrible act, or Tamar who was the victim. The person who's actually condemned in that story, if you go back and read it, is David, who didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, the point of the story is, if you know that something that evil is going on, by George, you better address it, because it's going to cause problems. There's a justice issue, there's fairness, there's setting example to make sure people know that we're not going to tolerate this kind of stuff. And David is condemned through that story for not responding. And that's a lesson for us today, you know, to look at that and not shy away from some of those hard things, but learn there's a role for us.
There's reasons.
There's
because
reasons
I mean, if we start pushing away those sort of topics of the Bible, and we start to get our messages and our interpretation of Scripture from society, we're in for a bad news is coming.
And the reason we're in for bad news is back where we started. Society says Dr. Seuss is evil and says Cardi B is good. Literally, if you want to base anything that you want to judge about your life on that standard, you are asking for problems. Because they're so far off from what is wholesome and healthy. Look, I get it, but we all have to understand that Dr. Seuss came from a time when there were drawings and things, and we didn't have the understanding we have today. But to judge him for a cartoon and not judge, the glorification of pornography on the stage like they did at the Grammys. Look, both of them are bad, but they're not in the same ballpark.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You see, so like how Tim just mentioned, Dr. Seuss was in a certain time period. So was King David.
Absolutely.
I mean, so it's not hard for them to say, well, look at him, boom, done, canceled.
Yeah.
And we no longer have Scripture, which is the foundation of the church and the Christian lifestyle.
And it's not meant to be easy. I mean, God didn't give us the Bible, and Jesus, certainly in his teachings, he wasn't, dishing things out on a silver platter. He was making it challenging. I mean, some of the parables, we've grown up with them, and they're beautiful, and we love them, but they're really challenging. And, a story that Parker was talking about with Tamar and what happened to her, that's a very challenging story. It's not meant to be easy because, I don't know if you all noticed, the world we live in is not an easy place. And sometimes some very difficult things happen, and we need to wrestle through them. But we can't allow this Overton window that is constantly shifting, of this thing that used to be not for polite society now is, and this thing that we always held on to as a basis is now kicked out.
When the Bible falls out, so does everything else. That
the Overton window needs to
it.
shift, right? And we can say that about a lot of things, not just the Bible, but certainly the Bible's on that list. And as we're putting those things together, it's not meant to be easy. But if we go canceling everything that we don't like, or everything that challenges us, or upsets us, or offends us, and that window is going to keep closing and closing to the point that it's only a pinhole, and hardly anything can happen anymore, because everybody's going to be canceled. We're all going to hate each other, and it doesn't allow for creativity. It doesn't allow for any of those things anymore. And that's a world I don't want to live in.
It's a matter of knowing the importance of Scripture.
Yeah.
I've had a couple people ask me why I always bring a Bible to church with me, and because I might be one of the only ones. There's a handful of us that bring Bibles to churches. Well, one reason is because, not saying I wouldn't ever trust a pastor. However, if you walk into a church and I see 0 Bibles, I get very alarmed. Because that means that pastor could say anything and make up any scripture from the book of Moses, which of course is not a book.
Doesn't exist, yeah.
So it's very important to know Scripture and know what message you are receiving. It's so very, very important to understand the importance of Scripture. Yeah. I mean, it is, because if we don't know and we don't understand the purpose of those stories like Tamar, it's not going to be hard for people to start canceling that.
Well, yeah, because they're going to say, well, that story's in there because it's condoning it, which, I mean, you only had a very rudimentary reading of it will tell you that act is not condoned.
Yeah,
definitely not condoned. And we need to be able to understand what lesson they're teaching, even with the hard stuff, because it's meant to be challenging. So
I guess this episode turned into a little bit more of, for my end. Tim's going a little bit different way. I'm going a little bit different way. I can tell. But I just want to say is read Scripture, and making sure, and don't, I mean, these study plans you might find somewhere, read a chapter, read a segment, and decipher it, and understand what is being said. Because you will eventually, if you start at the first book of the Bible, that story of Tamar is in Genesis. You'll run into it.
Yeah, pretty quick, yeah.
So I beg of you, read Scripture and understand its importance, and look around and see, the morals and the values and everything that book has to offer is what's literally the best part of society, because we have actually accepted some of those things. We're not walking around killing each other, mostly because of the Bible and its moral standard.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
And do you want to live in a society that says that a document like that is not acceptable? I don't. I don't know that any of us actually could, because the principles of respect and loving our neighbor, stuff that we learn from the Bible, that we don't find that anyplace else. I mean, you could read all the legislation we have in our culture now. ever commanded to love each other. I mean, those things aren't in there. Those are moral teachings that we get from the Bible, and to throw that book out, or to say it's outside of what's polite, man, we've taken away such an important part of, or what should be such an important part of our lives. So
scary road we could be traveling on.
Yep. So if we're going to be canceling stuff, well, first of all, let's not be canceling stuff. Let's listen more and cancel less.
The only thing that needs to be canceled is cancel culture.
Yes. Actually, I would also advocate that if daylight savings time got canceled, I'd be okay with that too. But outside of that, nothing else. So, anything else there, Parker?
Find a Bible and read it.
Read it. Back cover to cover. Read it. So, all right, guys, we appreciate you tuning in with us, and we hope everybody has a great week.